everybody. Welcome back to Reclaiming America. We have another great show for you. This time our topic is going to be education.
Or Bill's
the
lack
good, the
thereof.
bad, or the ugly. And really the third part will probably be the majority of our discussion, but we'll get there. Anyway, I'm Bill.
I'm Dan.
And we're about to reclaim America.
So we're going to talk education today. So again, as we're recording this, we're getting ready. Some of us are taking a little vacation. Actually, both of us are.
Yep.
So we thought we'd do some shows a little different than we normally do. Normally do current event topics, and I prove Bill wrong on everything, and we go from there. Today, we're kind of focusing on one thing, and maybe some others. We'll see.
We're taking up issues that are timeless and not necessarily
Pretty much,
limited.
yeah. So education, I don't know, has it been in the news much lately?
Only every time you open up a paper or you look at something.
You go online, you watch the news, you turn paper. Nobody opens a paper anymore, Bill.
Yeah, they do.
Well, you might. Your generation might, but...
There is a newspaper out there. You haven't seen it. No one reads it, but it's out there. It's in all the... I see it every morning when I go get a drink.
Not to sidetrack, but our local newspaper here, when I first moved here, it was like this big.
Yep.
It's now like this big.
Yeah, and that's Sunday.
That's the last time I bought the Sunday edition, no joke, I counted. It was 19 pages total.
And 18 of them were ads.
And, 3/4 of ads on every one of them. But that's sidetracking.
Then we have our weekly papers, which...
Oh, there's those too. Education, hot topic, to say the least. A lot of areas we can go with it. Let's start with issues with it right now. Let's just in general. Why don't you kind of talk about a couple of them?
If you're looking at the biggest issue that's bouncing around now that's got the most controversy, depends who you're talking to. Are we limiting books so that kids are age appropriate, or are we burning and banning books like they did in Germany during the Hitler reign? So we have both sides of that issue going on, and the reality is people are saying that certain books are age appropriate. Does a 6-year-old need to see all the personal parts of a male and female, or the third gender, if you want to put it out there, and
the 57th.
The 57 genders, if you want to go out there. It's a Heinz special.
Actually, I think we're up to 90
Maybe it's a Heine special. Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. All right, you're going to get us in trouble, Bill.
But the reality is people are saying that there's certain books out there that are just not appropriate at certain ages for kids.
And it's funny because those people that are on the opposite view of that and say you should be able to show them are the same ones who don't want other books to be shown because they're subversive.
Like the Bible.
The Bible is one. The Catcher in the Rye is one I've heard. There's a few others that I could throw out there. I don't know, 1984. It's funny how they claim it's book burning, banning, whatever term you want to use, when it's one way, but when they want to remove it, it's, subversive to have those books in there.
Yet, what I also find fascinating with it, people are being thrown out of school board meetings.
And this is where I was going to go, yeah.
Because they're bringing in the books and reading them out loud, what the kids are getting in their libraries, and they're being told that's inappropriate, and they're throwing them out of the meeting. Yet they won't let adults hear it, but the kids can take the book out and read it to their heart's content.
And if you don't believe what we're saying, go on YouTube, put in the search bar, Asheville, North Carolina, Baptist minister reads book to local school board or something like. That's all I had to put in, and go watch it, because it is a hoot. How you can't say that here. You need to stop. And he just went on. He was great. Kudos to him for that.
And there is a reality that we're not banning books, but there is an age appropriateness for books, and it's certain. At certain levels, high school seniors, maybe they should be able to look at controversial issues and deal with it.
Actually, I would argue they should be reading stuff like that at that age.
I agree.
Both sides, right? One of the things I talk about with my education, I was fortunate. When I was a junior, I could have graduated, I had all my credits. So my senior year, I could do anything. It didn't matter. I had nothing I had to take. And one of the things I took was government, was one of them. And I had a fantastic teacher, and he made us read things like the Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, Mein Kampf.
There's a heavy one.
Imagine if you tried to read that. But his point behind it is I want you to see all of it, right? And as I look back, and mind you, this is 50 years ago, or almost 50 years ago, he never gave his viewpoint. And I was thinking about this not too long ago, a month or so ago. I don't ever remember him saying to me he's in favor of anything. He just presented as, the way he was taking the class was, the first part of the year was how the U.S. government structured and all that. But then he opened it up so that you could, remember the Soviet Union was, the big bear.
They were coming to get us.
And all that. So he wanted us to understand their political mindset. He had us reading things on different Asian cultures and stuff. And it opened my eyes to stuff. I mean, that's gone now. And I do think someone...
Well, we don't teach critical thinking.
You can't teach it if you're not allowing the expression of views you don't agree with.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah. Now, should a 6-year-old be reading Das Kapital? No. I mean, they wouldn't understand it anyway. But to the biological side, age appropriate.
Yep.
And I'll even go a little bit further. I think you got to have some limitations on why would they not then let you to put, I don't even know the magazines in there because I know Playboy doesn't exist anymore, but if you're going to...
Let's assume for the sake of
argument, say it does, but why wouldn't you let Playboy in the high school or the middle school? And you say that to some of the people that are like, we should allow that. And they're like, no, that's porn. That's your viewpoint. But how's it any different?
See, it kind of broke my heart when it went out of business because I was going to try and make money from
it. Are
it.
they officially out of business?
Yeah, they're no longer publishing the magazine. And I was going to
only read it for the articles.
Busy Executive, I was going to do one in Braille. But
yeah. See, I did not know they were done.
Oh, yeah, their history.
I did not know. They came for them, or they...
Well, because as they said when they went out of business, there's nothing you can't see on the internet or anywhere else that we're showing.
That's changing. That's another show, by the way, we have to talk about.
Okay.
Because so you know what I'm talking about. Pornhub has pulled out. You can't live in Virginia or I think it's Arkansas. They blocked it.
Good for them.
Because
Virginia?
Pornhub blocked it because the legislatures passed laws that that said you had to prove you were over 18.
Oh, they made them accountable.
They made them accountable, and
God,
rather than chance it, they pulled out. But it kind of dovetails with what we're talking about, right? Is parents are trying to hold school boards accountable. And it ultimately, and I know you agree with me on this, it should be the parents that determine.
Yes, to a great extent. Not 100%, but to a great extent.
We're not talking, I'm saying let's get rid of the extremes out of the argument, right? But in general, the parents should be determining. You hear the argument, well, what if the parent doesn't agree with homosexuality? That's the parent's right to not agree with it. You may not like it, but it's not your job to teach another parent's kid.
And for years when we got into issues like that in schools and for purposes of discussion, and I'm a retired high school principal both in New York and in North Carolina, so I've been exposed. Let's rephrase that.
Be careful how you... I was just thinking, that is not a word.
I have been...
working
and involved with this issue at various levels.
Oh, I can see them cut that clip right there. I might have to bleep you on that one.
Probably
just to cover you. Yeah.
But the issue really becomes parental rights and what the kids are learning. And what really needs to happen is what's starting to happen in at least in North Carolina, and I'll talk about that probably because we're the most knowledgeable about it. One of the biggest unintended consequences of COVID was putting the kids on screens and the parents being home and seeing what's actually being taught. That set up a war like you've never seen. Parents say, you're teaching that to my kids? Where's reading, writing, and arithmetic? I hate to put it in the simple 3 R's, which is, he learned arithmetic and writing, but starting with R's. But we deal with that.
You learned writing on stone tablets. Stop it.
I was chiseling every answer, so that's the way it works.
You're the only person left on earth that could read Egyptian hieroglyphics. Who are you kidding?
I wrote them.
But just cracking up over there.
Yeah, I can tell.
It's, again, that was a turning point, I think, in a lot of ways. but it did open up
the eyes to a bunch of parents. Yeah.
It opened up a can of
And
worms.
I don't think the Democrats or the left was even looking for that to happen. They were quite content with what they were doing, because don't forget, when you went back, and again, this is a history lesson, you go back to the 1940s and 50s, the 30s actually, they were trying to take over the country, and they realized at some point they couldn't do a revolution like they did in Russia. They were not going to get people to rise up and overthrow the country, so they had to backdoor it. And that meant taking over the pillars of government, of education, of legal areas, of the press, and taking over those areas and teaching the left's agreements there. So you're going to train the next generation and the generation after that to think a certain way. And that's where we are.
And where did that model come from, by the way? Or what book?
Souls?
Well, there's a lot of them, but you might want to read Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto. The two books they're trying to ban. Why would that, subversive? But to Bill's point is, to even take it a step further, is parents saw what was going on and they're like, well, why didn't you tell us this? And then they went looking, and it's nowhere in the curriculum.
And then what happens when the parents started questioning things? They were labeled as terrorists, domestic terrorists.
Extremist is the new word now.
Oh, extremists.
It was that. Now they've
And it was labeled by the FBI, who has no business in education to begin with.
It's education is obviously a fundamental thing that we all need. And it is the fastest way to subvert any government.
And it's also the fastest way, a elected government with a democracy can only survive with educated people. If you don't have those people, you're going to end up having a banana republic or whatever else you've got out there. We need to have a good education program that trains our kids not only to read and do arithmetic, but to think and to analyze what's going on out there and make a decision whether they support it or not support it. But that's their right, but they need to know the basics. We don't do that nowadays. We are teaching a certain way of level.
Let's go there. I want to get into that a little bit.
Okay, sir.
So you're talking about the 3 R's, which I always laughed about because arithmetic is spelled with an A, but okay.
Not in your school.
Yeah. Well, no, I was in a city school.
And by the way, writing starts with a W.
I was just picking one, but anyway. Let's talk about that. The fundamentals are gone, right? So as an employer, when I go to hire people now, not that I do, but when I was hiring people, oh God, right? Something as simple as a resume. They don't understand English. They don't know what a verb is or any of that. They and I'm talking the last couple of generations, and I know I'm generalizing, and it's not nice what I'm saying, but I don't fault the kids. I fault the teachers and school boards, because simple things like how to put a sentence together. I hated English. I did. But I learned it.
Nobody liked to draw out the nouns and the verbs and
math.
the tree.
Not too long ago, it's probably a year now, I made the mistake of going to the local coffee shop and paying in cash. And I handed the girl, I don't remember the exact number, but it was like $4.35. So I handed her $5.35.
Oh, worst thing you do is give them the change.
She looked at it, and I felt bad. I'm not trying to make fun of her. I felt bad. She couldn't figure out. She owed me $1 back.
Well,
I mean, it's like, that's on the education system. I don't fault her at all. And that's what I'm talking about, is we've lost the basics. We're so worried about STEM, which is important, don't get me wrong, or, various social things we got to teach.
We forgot the basics.
Or graduating kids that can't do simple math, can't balance checkbooks, can't read. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but it is scary what's out there.
And also what bothers me is they're being taught how corrupt and terrible this country is and how it's always been that way.
That too, yeah.
Yeah, and that leads to the fact that these are the men and women who, in the event the balloon goes up, are going to be expected to come forward and say, I will serve your country and defend it. How are they going to sign up to defend something they think is corrupt and terrible and that they're permanent victims of? And we've been teaching generations of that.
There are some people out there calling for the reinstitution of the draft right now. So,
well, in fact, you still have to register at 18 if you're a male.
Don't get me going, Bill.
You know, the women for some reason don't, but the men cannot even get a
started.
government thing till they register at 18.
Right. The point being with all this is these kids are coming out of college unprepared. I mean, I've taught at college. I was an adjunct professor in IT, so I'm teaching them how to fix computers or how to build them and stuff like that. So, but I still saw they couldn't communicate, like properly communicate. And again, I'm not faulting them. And I remember saying to one of the English professors and having a conversation with her about it, saying, is this what you're seeing? Because she's like, oh, you have no idea. A term paper. We all hated doing them.
Oh, God.
I hate term papers, right? But she said they can't even, the basics of forming a sentence or expressing a thought. I remember her saying something along the line, I'm paraphrasing it, but they can't put it together so it makes sense. They could kind of go all around it, but logical.
Well, applying what you've learned into something different is a whole different world. And I would give you an example on that in the short time before the break. In my last assignment as a high school principal in North Carolina, one of my teachers had to leave for health reasons. Mm-hmm. And I had to hire a new teacher. And the new teacher couldn't come for like 7 weeks based on whatever reasons there were. And I had 3 classes that they were double period classes. Uh-huh. I could farm out 2 of them. I had to take one myself as a licensed social studies teacher. So I took over
That's a scary thought.
I took over an 10th grade honors class.
Uh-huh.
And I have to tell you, they loved it the day I walked in, and they cheered me the day I left. Because they could not get over the concept. I would give them work to do, and it was never just regurgitated back to me. Take this and apply it to this. Explain how this works with that.
Yeah, learn from it.
Yeah, and no, I can memorize this and feed it back to you. That's what they were trained to do. And I made them think, and they could not wait till that substitute teacher actually arrived, and I could go back to my office. But you know what? Their parents still thank me because I occasionally see some of them, and they still remember arguing with their sons and daughters about it's not a bad thing to take this and apply it to that.
Because, I don't know, that's what happens in the real world.
Really?
What's that saying? Those who don't learn from history
are doomed to repeat it.
Doomed to repeat it. And, gee, look where we are now and compare it to, I don't know, the Weimar Republic in, say, 1931. Funny how it kind of works that way.
What goes around, comes around.
And history is being removed from a lot of curriculums right now.
Or revised.
Revised.
Again,
removed.
1984.
I call it removed in the sense that, not that they're taking the classes away, that they're removing certain facts.
And substituting
and replacing
feelings rather than facts.
Yeah. All right, on that note,
I think we should
take a quick break now, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about another issue that's near and dear to my heart on education.
Well, I can't wait to hear this.
Because I want to get your opinions on it.
Now you're going to get the facts of life. But anyway, I'm Bill. We'll be back in a short time.
All right, so welcome back to Reclaiming America. We're going to go to a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So for those that don't know, I speak out on issues on other channels that affect men and boys. And one of the big things that's not talked about, that needs to be talked about, is education and how boys are, well, to be honest with you, not getting an education at this point. So if you go back to the 1970s, and Bill was about 80 years old at that time.
81.
The curriculum needed to change. And I wholeheartedly agree that it did, right? It needed to be focused more because roughly, and I'm rounding the numbers, 60% of the kids going to college in 1970 were male, 40% were female. So,
round figures.
Rightfully so, things needed to change. And again, he was around, I wasn't. I think the curriculum kind of favored boys at that point, a little bit.
I'm not sure it favored boys or not.
Well, the way it was done.
The boys have always had an issue, and that's never been addressed in schools. And again, we are now stereotyping, for want of a term, but just it applies to most. It's never generalizing. Okay, better word.
And that's a fair statement.
Boys you put them in a classroom, you sit them at a desk, it's deadly to them.
It's the worst thing you could do.
You know, girls, you can sit down there and they're fine with it, and they'll learn, they'll do whatever
That's
you
how
need to
they
do.
learn better.
But you got boys that got to get up and they got to walk around and they got to do things if they're going to be successful. That's just the nature of the biological wiring. Thank you.
You know, the reason I brought up the numbers is the numbers of 180. So roughly, again, I'm rounding, roughly 60% of the kids going to college now are female, 40% are male, and that 40% is dropping rapidly. It's scary what's going on, and it goes directly to what you're talking about, because I've done a lot of research on this. So from both a biological standpoint and a mental standpoint, the worst thing you can do to educate boys is put them in a desk for 6 hours and basically say, stare at a screen or a tablet or whatever.
Or take notes. Write it down.
They don't take notes, most of them. They don't learn that way. Are there some that will? Absolutely.
That's why we're generalizing.
Right,
We're not.
but worse, I don't want to talk about the extremes. The majority of the time.
And what people don't understand, and I'm going to simplify this information. People learn one of three ways. Okay. You're a visual learner, you're an auditory learner, and you're what we call a kinetic learner. You do by doing. Okay.
I call it hands-on.
Hands-on, same difference.
Yep.
Now, there's truth that you have a secondary. You know, for
Absolutely.
example, I am audio visual, so I learn best by hearing, and my second best operation is actually by viewing. But I remember what I hear.
And none of it's worked with you when I've tried to educate you. But anyway, go ahead.
But we do not design our classrooms that way.
Nope.
First of all, here's the biggest issue. The majority of teachers have traditionally been successful and taught off the blackboard, which is visual learning.
Yep.
That's how they were taught to teach, and that's how they learned. Ergo, that's how they're going to impart their information.
Regurgitating what they were taught. Yep.
One of the most successful programs out there took 2 days to teach a lesson. Okay, but what you did is you taught it visually, you did some auditory work with it, and you found a way to kinetically make the kids that learn better by do something. You know, for example, I used to have trouble with my science teachers and my math teachers. There is absolutely nothing wrong when you're teaching fractions or you're teaching measurement. Take that class to the shop or take it to the home ec room.
Yes, that's use an example I was going to throw out there with shop.
And let them go down there and figure out what a quarter an inch is, what a cup is, and you know something. It's been proven what you do, you retain longer than just visualizing or hearing it.
Especially for boys.
And that's probably true.
So you're talking about what you're talking about. I am a visual and hands-on guy.
Me too.
Right? You can spew at me all you want. It goes here and there. It just does. I pick up some things. I'm not, but I need to look at something, read it, look at the board, whatever. That's part of it. But for me, it's the hands-on. And people know that I've worked in IT. I learned what I learned on computers by doing. There is no book I've ever read, and trust me, I've read enough of them, that taught me anything. I mean, obviously I learned some things, but as far as working with computers, tearing them down, putting them together, this is a beautiful example. You talked about shop. Fractions, forget it. Like learning in the classroom, forget it. They did take us down, we had shop class back then, and we were building things like a shelf or whatever.
Or the old proverbial birdhouse.
I don't think I ever actually built a birdhouse. I remember a shelf. Maybe I did. I don't know. But that was it, right? It needs to be, 6 3/4 inches. That resonated with me. And then it was like making the calculations off of that. That's how I learned fractions. It's exactly right, nailed it. I would also argue things like I took home ec. We baked our little cookies. Well, you learn what a cup is, a quarter cup.
I'll give you an interesting, what I had to do when I was an AP in the middle school. The boys were balking with home ec. I don't get home ec, and that's a girls' course. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
and middle school especially.
I might have said that.
Okay. What I did was I created a course called Bachelor Living.
There you go. See, there you go.
Same course.
Makes total sense, Bill.
But now, guys, you may get divorced. You may never get married. You got to know how to sew a button,
You
cook some
rebranded it.
clothes.
Yeah.
You know. And I'll give you my favorite story with one of the boys. I got a call from a parent one day who said to me, "I need to talk to you about what your home ec teacher is teaching my son." And she came and said, "I want to know why every Friday he has to bring a steak to school."
A steak.
Steak, as in, well,
Like
I went to
food
see the
steak?
teacher.
Wait a minute, food steak?
A food steak.
Really?
Really? And so I went to see the teacher.
You must have been a
and
rich
she
school.
said, "Well, Mr. Moore, here's what's actually happening. On Fridays, it's free cooking day. Bring in whatever you want to cook and you get to eat it."
Smart kid.
So the kid told Mom, "I need a steak."
Gotcha.
So, yeah, and Mom almost killed him.
Yeah, but he's a genius. Because I'm sitting there going, why in the hell would they require a steak every
And
week?
that was my first reaction and Mom's reaction.
Wow. Anyway, you got me on that one. When you look at the way the curriculums are now, it basically is sit in a classroom. Even STEM, like I've been involved with trying to push STEM. It's rote. I call it rote learning. You sit at your desk like this with your little iPad now, or you stare at the whiteboard because they don't do blackboards anymore.
And the whiteboards cost $10,000.
Yeah, as opposed to a piece of chalk and a board that never wears out. In fact, I think the one school that I went to grade school in was still using the same blackboards the last time I visited a few years back. Boys don't learn that way. And what has been the response? Because boys will be boys. They can't sit still. They get active. They fidget. And what's the school's answer?
Punishment.
That, but there's something else.
Drugs.
Oh,
Thank
drugs?
you.
Okay.
They drug the shit out of them.
That's probably true. He's got ADD, and we have to put him on some sort of medicine.
So, not to make fun of your age, but when did you start teaching?
68, actually.
68. So late 60s, early 70s. How much ADHD or ADD or anything?
Very little.
Very little.
Today, it's
every other
monumental.
kid. At best, every other kid. And again, I went through this with my oldest son. They were adamant. He was a highly intelligent kid. School was too easy for him. Never took a book home. He breezed through it. And they never challenged him. He could not sit still because he was bored to freaking tears. Their answer, we need to drug him. He's got ADHD. I know it. This was the school system. And I'm like, no. Nope. It's on you. You're not challenging him. Nope. Long story short, we took him to one of the best psychologists in the area, and that psychologist went, "You don't have ADHD or anything. He's bored."
What's interesting, I had the same thing with my son in kindergarten now. This is kindergarten, first semester of school.
Imagine that. Okay, go on.
Now, my son's in a different school district than I'm working. So my wife calls me up and she's crying. I said, "What happened?"
Boy.
They've tested our son and they're putting him into special ed program and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I know the state laws. So my first reaction is no one's talked to me about any of this special ed stuff. So I take the next day off from school and I go in to see the principal who does not know what I do or where I do it.
Oh, that must have been fun.
So I walk in and I sit down with Mr. M and I'll leave it that way because him and I had a great relationship for the 6 years we were in the school together.
Okay.
And I said, "What's going on?" He says, "Well, we have made a lot of studies, and these studies indicate that if you have a fine motor problem, it leads to a gross motor problem, which leads to learning disability. So we've developed this program to exercise the nerves." Now, being married to a nurse, I had certain knowledge about physical issues. So I said, "Let me see these programs." So I go down and see the teacher. The kindergarten teacher's giving me the same line. And then I go, "Where's the program?" They take me in to watch a room with my son and X number of kids. I don't remember, 9 or 10, whatever. They're doing gorilla exercises around the room. And their answer to me was, they're exercising the nerves into development. Now, I walk out and I turn to the principal and I said, then the ultimate was, and I taught in the Yonkers, okay? And at this point, I was a different school district. Mm-hmm. He says, "And you're very lucky, Mr. M, because if your son was in the Yonkers school district, he'd be above average. But here we found the problems, and we can deal with his issues. So now I've got smoke and chew ears."
I was going to say, you must have been ready to explode.
So I turned around and I started saying, First of all, I want to see those studies because I don't believe a bit of them. Secondly, I'm going to do a different study with you. I want to take those kids in my son's class and I want to buy them all a Big Mac for 6 months. And I'm going to pay for it. And at the end of that control group and my son's class, I'm going to guarantee you those neurons will develop naturally on their own. And there won't be a significant difference between my Big Mac group and your gorilla exercise group.
You get fired up here. I
I
love
was
it.
on a roll.
You still are.
And then
40 years later.
Oh. And then the answer was, well, they're actually, the survey, the studies are not done yet. They're indications. They're not yet complete yet. So this one through. And I said, and by the way, I know the state law. You put my son in a special ed class and you've never notified me or put me through any kind of a Next day, 17 letters went out to parents.
Oh, yeah.
They had screwed up big time. So anyway, Mr. M and I, for 6 years, he was just kind of there. Then he's at graduation. He's going, well, I guess this is our last trip together. I said, have you looked at your incoming class? My daughter's here next.
Oh, boy.
We have another number of years together.
Kid,
So anyway, side note on education.
But, I mean, it speaks to where we're at now, right? Do you honestly believe that educators don't know that boys are lagging right now?
I don't think they do.
Okay. I'm actually surprised.
I don't think... I'm going to take that back. There are some excellent teachers who do know, and they're trying.
Right.
But there's a whole bunch of other people that are out there saying, I'm presenting this material. If you don't get it, it's not my problem.
Really?
I'm sorry. They're
Think
there.
about that for a second.
And there's an issue there.
There's a huge issue there.
And again, I don't take it away from the good teachers are out
Oh,
there.
I do on that one.
Yeah.
You adapt.
Yeah. There are a bunch of good teachers out there, but there's too many other people that say, I'm offering the curriculum, and the fact that he gets it or she doesn't get it is not my issue. I'm offering it.
And to be somewhat fair to them, some of them don't have a choice. They have to offer that curriculum.
And some of them are in curriculums that are written so long, they don't have time to spend an extra week on something.
Right, they're so strict.
Because
in what
they've
they're
got
doing.
so much
I
to
saw
finish
that, yeah.
before the end of the year.
Or they're teaching to a test.
Which is exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. I only spent a couple of years in K-12. I had to get out because I saw what was going on. And they were teaching to the state. This was in New York State, the state test. And it was all about that. They didn't care whether the kid learned anything as long as he could pass that test. Because they were graded and their pay was determined based on how they overall class average did.
And bonuses, etc.
Bonuses and all that.
They and that was one of the things they used to start doing. They started saying, look, if you can raise everybody half a year grade or whatever else, you're going to get X number of dollars. And you know what that does? That just asks people to cheat. And I hate to put it that way.
No, they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, they would.
But that brings up another thing. So, again, they've homogenized it all too. And again, I'm talking about it from the boys' perspective, but in general, this applies to all things. There are kids out there that are, I was one back in the day, it was called Academically Talented, the AT program. I started taking French in 3rd grade, for example. And there, that's why I was able, if I wanted to graduate as a junior.
I was dating Frenchie in the 5th grade,
But now they don't do that because that means, well, they're getting favored status, or the kid that's not in AT, he's going to feel bad about himself. So what happens is what happened to my son. He's sitting in a class that he's up here above him, and that's not to say he's better than anyone else, but academically that's where he's at, and they're not teaching him anything. So their answer was to drug him. Meanwhile, you've got the other side of it. There are kids that need far more than that baseline they're trying to hit. Yeah. And they're being neglected just as much.
And I will give you an example. I was riding with this math teacher to school. We carpooled, 3 of us. And she was complaining that her daughter, and I'm trying to make sure I don't get the names involved in this, was in a class, and she was, and I call AT&D, almost talented and gifted. And
almost?
Almost.
I was like, wait, did I hear that right?
Yeah, the kid was not being challenged enough, and she wanted the teacher to develop all these special lesson plans so her daughter would not be bored. And I said, that's great. You don't do that in your class, do you? Well, I don't have anybody at that level.
I was going to say, what was the excuse? That was exactly what was in my brain. What was she going to come up with?
They're not at the level that my daughter is. So, yeah, and I said, I teach the other half of your group. I know there's kids in there that can do well.
Yeah.
And they sit in your classroom because they got it done 10 minutes into the class, and they need something to challenge them to keep them rolling. Otherwise, they're going to get in trouble, which leads to the next issue. How many kids, because of that, either not knowing what they're doing and they're far behind, or they're so far ahead, they look and get into trouble.
My son,
And that causes them to get sent to the principal, sent to some other room, instead of finding a way to challenge and channel that into something productive. The kids are being taught, you're going to get punished if you do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And maybe I should go slower in the class, or maybe I should just turn off and sit there and stare at four walls if I can.
Well, what happened with my son is he ended up dropping out in his senior year.
Really?
Yep. He's like, I'm getting nothing out of this. Why would I waste my time? And I couldn't stop him. I tried. I did everything I could. He went and took the GED and no problem. Like, he didn't even study for it. He just went, I'm going to go take my GED, done.
And you know something? What people don't realize, by the way, just cutting in that GED issue, that may be an appropriate run for certain kids, because once you get that GED and you go to a 2-year or a 4-year college, that GED doesn't mean a thing. You're getting your next associate's degree or your bachelor's degree, and no one cares about that GED.
And I will tell you, as someone who's an employer, and I had people that would put in resumes and they had a GED instead of a high school ed, for me, I couldn't care less. It's what can you do for me now?
They went back and they found a way to be successful.
Yeah, and I think some of it was my son's history, But I remember I would get resumes in, and HR would be like, "Well, they got a GED." I'm like, "So, did they pass? Do they have a high school diploma?" Yes, they do.
Next question.
Why is this a problem? Again, it wasn't because he couldn't do the work or anything. He just wasn't challenged, and there are a lot of kids like that. And unfortunately, we're seeing it get even worse, I think, which kind of gives us an opportunity to take a break, because I want to come back
with solutions.
And that's what I want to go with it. So why don't we take a short break and come back, and I'm going to ask the ex-principal here what his solutions are.
Oh, we don't have only 15 minutes? We're in trouble.
Yeah, and I've got a few of my own, which
means we have another hour show.
Which most people are not going to like. So
that's
I'll
fine.
be right back on Reclaiming America.
Talk to you soon.
Welcome back to Reclaiming America, where smartass over here thinks he's getting me. So we have been talking education. We've brought up a couple different issues.
And we've finally ticked off a number of teachers and maybe some parents here and there.
I don't give a shit anymore. This is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. And we could do 3 more hours on the issues, but we want to at least give you some thoughts on solutions. So I'm going to throw it to Bill first. What would be one solution that you would come up with?
Well, first solution would be to force teachers to offer lessons in 3 areas, like I talked about. Okay. Audio, visual, and kinetic or hands-on. Make sure every lesson you do is over a day and a half or a day, cuts those 3 modalities, and you will guarantee everyone does better in those classes because they've had a chance to work with it. And if you're going to do a different way with that, put them in groups, let them work as a group, but pick the groups. Make sure you've got someone with each of those modalities in those groups so they all have something to add to the group, and you just don't let them pick their friends. That would be very helpful to get started.
It's very similar to what I would say is divide the students up.
There you go.
And I would take it, here's where I'm going to get ready for some letters. We got to divide.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G?
No, boys and girls. I think we've reached a point now where it's better to separate them and teach them differently.
And I'm
not saying, by the way, I don't mean boys' schools, girls' schools. I'm talking within one school, boys' classrooms, girls' classrooms.
Well, we do that for certain courses now. In health classes, they will divide up when they do sex education.
That's a beautiful example. Do it across the board.
And sometimes that's necessary.
I think doing that.
And gym is another example.
Gym would be another one. I think that should be the norm for now. Because, again, we're talking about a huge gap between the two sexes. And I don't want to take anything away from the girls whatsoever. But in order to address the boys, you would have, if they're co-ed, you're going to have to take away from the girls. That's not right. That's what happened in the 70s. is they took away from the boys to the point they gave it all to the girls. Education now is girl-centric. This is my solution: is separate them.
Is this a version of boys need to be heard too?
Yes, it is. I think this is the biggest change that needs to happen, because again, you're leaving the girls not status quo, but you can focus on what works best for them, and this is similar to what you're talking about. The boys, then you address what needs to be done with them, and then you get them so that they're compatible.
And you know what's interesting? There are a number of Catholic schools that are all boys schools and all girls schools. They find it works better.
There is some truth to that. I don't know if I'm ready to go that far as all schools, because I do think there's benefits to having the coexistence.
But you know what I would do with that? I'll go to the charter schools for a minute, and I will,
Bingo.
Again, take you to a situation that I almost was lucky enough to get involved with, but the person I was working with had the nerve enough to die on me and didn't finish what we were doing.
We've talked about this before.
Yeah. And in that particular district, we needed an all-male school, and we were going to do a military operation. We were going to bring in all guys. We were going to bring in the ROTC, junior ROTC, and we were going to have 4 grades of military, all male, and we were going to train them in education. We're going to train them in respect. We're teaching them in manners, the whole 9 yards. And we had the whole program set. Unfortunately, we had a school picked out for us. It was already donated. But the gentleman I was working with, he said to me, Bill, you write the curriculum and you tell me what I need to get together, and you can staff it because you're retired Army at the time and you could play that game. He says, I'll get the funding because I'm a minority, and because I'm a minority, I can get the money to make the school happen. Unfortunately, the curriculum is written. I've got it someplace. We were all set to go a 4-year program. He just, God wanted him. And he went up to, it was his time. I couldn't argue. And his son would not kick in and do it. He would work with me. So the program died. But I truly believe we also need to put some schools together, charter schools, that address some of these needs and some of these, not only educational, but social issues.
That I was going to go here. That was the next thing I was going to go to, is we need to look at it. The number one demographic that's fallen behind more than any other is, unfortunately, black boys.
Black males, I prefer.
Males, boys. Well, they're boys at 8 years old.
Agreed. But
it's when you look at what their solutions are to them, as someone standing from the outside looking in, I'm like, that's not addressing anything.
But within schools, and I remember one of my staff did a program called Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is a takeoff of that show that was on the air. And what he did, he gathered, 15, 20 minority males in the school, varying ages, and this was a middle school at the time, okay? And he got them money donated. We dressed them up as far as suits and ties.
Oh.
And they had their dress-up days, and they were taught manners, and that whole crew of were successful for the rest of their lives as they went out of there.
So again,
I would say 90% successful.
People are going to scream out saying segregation. And in a manner of speaking, I can't disagree. But I would say I don't want to separate just black, white, Asian, whatever. But maybe if you separate the boys out first of all, and I don't want subgroups under it, but then you can put African American teachers in there to be the role models and to do the things you're talking about.
The only problem with that theory is the shortage of African American teachers.
There is, but again, what happens in the world when there's a vacuum? Somebody comes along to fill it.
But the problem is the following. Take North Carolina, and I'll go there again. The last time I was working, this is a few years old, there was a shortage of about 600 or 700 African American teachers if you want to program it around the state, okay? They were graduating probably close to 200 a year coming out of the various colleges, African American teachers. Those teachers are going to go to where the best salaries are.
Of course they are.
They're first-year teachers. They may or may not have a family, but they got a future ahead of them. And unfortunately, the better schools had better supplements, and they ended up with those teachers. And it did not help the poorer schools get the role models they needed to be there. And I'm not saying you had to be a black role model.
What you're saying. Yeah.
But it did not hurt to have someone standing who was a success, who's an African American, who's a Spanish leader. You pick one, and get in front of kids and say, look, you can do this too.
You ready for my next controversial one?
Oh, here we go. Here we get banned.
Because it's basically what you just said. At the state level, you determine pay, because every state's different.
Right.
And it's statewide. So most states, most areas, it's by the district, correct?
Not North Carolina.
No, but most states.
Most, yeah. For example, New York has 750 different contracts.
Correct. And the example I've used in the past using New York is state troopers. You graduate out, you don't get to, you can put in, I want to go here, here, here. You could be put anywhere in the state. Do the same with teachers. Because what we're trying to do with it is, if you want to come in, we're going to assign you here because we have a need. Let's say Utica has a need, or Yonkers was where you were at. Yonkers has a need. We're going to put the best person there, the best person that can fulfill that need. As opposed to what's happening now is you're going wherever. And then what I would do to make an incentive for the teachers is to say, if you agree to this, we're going to cover your college or a portion of it.
And that's exactly what my next point would be.
Yep.
You need to put an incentive because in North Carolina, there's two things. They all get the salary set by the state, but there are supplements which vary district to district. Right. And there are 116 school districts in this state. 100 counties,
but if you level that playing field.
And you turn around and you say, if you're going to go to a lower functioning school, no matter where the district is, it's a lower functioning school, we will help you with tuition payments, or we'll help you get your master's, or some sort of extra funding for you doing. But you got to give us X number of years in that position.
That's exactly it. So, like when we were talking about it in New York, Albany generally doesn't have a problem getting good teachers. I mean, Adirondacks, you're getting. I don't mean to be mean to anybody, but you're not getting the best teachers there, right? Because you're in the Adirondacks. It's the boonies, and they pay crap. Those school districts they're lucky they can put two nickels together.
Well,
right?
When I worked in Yonkers, we bordered the city, and the city's salary was maybe 80% of ours.
There you go.
So we could pick and choose who we
better.
wanted.
And by the way, I don't fault anybody for taking the better option.
No,
Why
they got
wouldn't
families
you?
to take care of.
Level the playing field. If the state has X number of $1 billion, everybody gets the same amount as far as pay. Base it on seniority. Then I would do things like incentives. All right, you're going to give us 5 years at this district. If you give us those 5 years, we're going to cover half your college costs or whatever.
Whatever. There's some incentive that will make you stay there.
And that way, these places that are underperforming are going to get those teachers that can get them where they need to be.
And that's important. The second thing that's important is the local districts need to control curriculum.
Okay.
Now, it is true that the state sets out curriculum guidance for certain courses that you have to take and whatever else. However, there is nothing in the rules that say you can't add to those requirements. For example, if a high school diploma is 18 credits and say in New Hanover, let's pick a place, okay? The local board can say, no, you now need 20 credits to graduate, and I'm going to put in 2 courses that you must take, and I'm going to design the curriculum. For example, if I had my way to do this, and I've suggested it, there would be at least a half credit course on the basics of learning how to do a bank account, a checking account.
Oh, I totally agree.
Developing a budget and things like that they all need to do. And the second one would be a civics course, which I design, which truly teaches civics and not the way that people think it is, but the way it should, or the way it is.
It's similar to but you want that at the local level.
It's local, it's control.
See, I think it should be at the state level. But everything you just said, I agree 100% with. There should be half credit course, whatever, half year course, whatever you want to call it, on balancing your checkbook, blah, 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 all that. That should be required at the state level. We need to get back to the basics too, right? When I went to school, you had to take X number of years of science, X number of years of everything. They do that to a certain extent, but now it's like, well, instead of biology, we're going to teach you blah.
And tying that to what's going on, and you're right, there were programs years ago that we're not using today. For example, a team of teachers that working together.
Okay. I actually love that.
Yeah, and I do think team teaching is a great way to go.
I do too.
But those teachers could coordinate, and they would coordinate, for example, around a social studies program in our case, okay? So, for example, if we were doing social studies in the colonial time, that English teacher could be doing readings from that time.
It brings it together.
Right.
Yep.
And then the math teacher could be working problems that work the colonies into what you got to do. The science teacher could do science experiments from that time and build it in. Cover your curriculum.
And the kids learn more.
And they're applying what they learn.
Into it.
The worst thing I used to hear is, you're a social studies teacher, why do I need to know English? And why are you correcting my English on a paper? Because you need to learn that. And they used to get upset. SP was my favorite word, and about every third word on the paper. SP.
And that was even with spell check, right?
No, we didn't have spell check then. I was spell check, and that was sad.
See, we agree on a lot of things. I mean, a little bit differences here and there, but again, we've got to get back to basics because our kids are falling behind the world.
And the other thing we need
to do... Oh, he's got another one.
Oh, yeah, I do.
You got about 2 minutes.
I got about 2 minutes to squeeze it in. We need to take the emphasis off college and put the emphasis back on hands-on work. There are multiple jobs out there. Our 2-year schools are doing a great job offering alternatives, but we're not teaching them in the schools.
Right.
And we're also teaching the kids, unfortunately, if you're going to be successful, you need that college degree. No, plumbers do real well. Carpenters do real well. Electricians can do real well. They don't need that college degree. They may or may not have associates.
The perfect field, computer science.
There you go.
You don't need... Because what colleges churns out are programmers, not computer techs. And guess where the money is?
That in networking, I understand there's big dollars in networking.
Those guys that run the wires through the ceiling? Yeah. Do you know how much money they make? They're not getting paid minimum wage, okay? Everything you said, wholeheartedly agree. But the problem is nothing's being done.
The problem is, in a local school district, you've got the authority to do these things. Take over the school boards.
Do it.
And make it happen. 57% of the school districts in North Carolina are now in Republican control. Those parents have fought to be there.
We couldn't leave the politics out of it.
No, you need to step up and say, this is what we demand, and these are the curriculums that need to be taught. Now, I've got to get off my soapbox because the executive producer is going to kill both of us.
It's going to kill you, not me. I'm ready to wrap it up. But one final thing, I want to get in real quick. Gym, shop, home ec, they need to be in there too.
Absolutely.
Enough said. All right, ready to wrap it up?
Time to say goodnight.
Am I doing the wrap up or you?
It's your turn.
It's always my turn.
Well, let's
wrap
it up so well.
Yeah, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you watch us on the various channels. We're on Spotify, because he asks me this every time, because he doesn't seem to know. Spotify, YouTube. We're on TikTok. He's the cowboy on TikTok. What else? I'm forgetting one. Twitter. Oh, Twitter. We're on Twitter.
Or X, which is now X
now. I am sorry. I'm never.
X marks the spot.
Elon, I'm sorry, but I love you, guy, but I'm never calling it X. It's just not going to happen. Because I don't think Xing should be a thing.
Well, you don't want to be X-rated
tweeting. Either. Yeah. So make sure you like, share, subscribe. Hey, comment, because we want to hear your thoughts on this.
And it's future shows. And if there's information that we can share with you or suggest, we'll be glad to come and talk to small groups and share all this knowledge that we have.
Well, they want me, not you, because I'm the pretty one. On that note, I shut them up. All right. We'll see you next time on
Brains were dynamite. Some people are disabled couldn't blow their nose. Here we go. See you next time.